Money doesn't exist. What you think is money is just a promise. A promise made by people you'll never meet, based on agreements you'll never see. And in the world of high finance, these promises have multiplied until they've reached numbers so large the human brain can no longer comprehend them. $900 trillion. This is the estimated value of the global derivatives market, a number so astronomical it makes all the physical money on the planet insignificant. Imagine all the world's economies combined, United States, China, European Union, all of them together, reaching approximately 150 trillion. Now multiply by 6. This is the size of the time bomb that no one can defuse. But what exactly are derivatives? Think of them as baits. Sophisticated baits on the future, disguised as financial instruments, baits on whether interest rates will rise or fall, baits on whether companies will thrive or fail, baits on baits, stacked in layers so complex that even the geniuses who created them can no longer fully track them. The story begins with a simple intention. It was 1973. The global monetary system had just abandoned the gold standard. The world was entering an era of unprecedented financial uncertainty, and someone had an idea. What if we could create contracts to protect ourselves against price fluctuations in the future? What if we could sell risk? This was the premise, the original purpose: protection, security, stability. But have you noticed how the best intentions often pave the way for the worst outcomes? What began as a shield transformed into a weapon. What should have protected became a bomb. But do you believe someone is really in control of all this? Or are we all just pretending to understand a system that has grown larger than our own comprehension? The 90s witnessed the explosion of derivatives. Wall Street bankers, sporting their gold Rolexes and confident smiles, sold these instruments as brilliant financial innovations. We're distributing risk, they said. We're making the system safer, and the world believed. The PhD mathematician creating pricing models on his cutting-edge computer. The hedge fund manager explaining to investors how they had tamed market volatility. The financial regulator smiling for the cameras while assuring the public that everything was under control. This was the golden age of derivatives, a celebration of human ingenuity, a monument to our ability to transform uncertainty into certainty, a gleaming pyramid of seemingly endless prosperity. What no one realized was that we were building the largest Ponzi scheme in history. If this is getting to you, imagine what comes next. Subscribe now to continue this journey down the financial rabbit hole. The error was fundamental and devastatingly simple. We confused mathematical calculation with control. The ability to calculate risks with the ability to eliminate them. But risk never really disappears. It just transforms, it hides, it waits patiently. In 2008, that risk finally revealed its face. It was a specific type of derivative, the infamous credit default swap, that helped transform a correction in the American housing market into a global financial crisis. Lehman Brothers, a bank with 158 years of history, collapsed in a matter of days. Panic spread, credit markets froze, the world stood on the edge of the abyss. Do you remember those days? The fear on the faces of news anchors, the alarming headlines, the images of bankers leaving their offices with cardboard boxes. But that was just a tremor, a seismic warning of the real earthquake that may still come. Because after the dust settled, something extraordinary happened. Instead of fundamentally reducing our dependence on derivatives, we did exactly the opposite. The market grew, it expanded, it became even more complex and interconnected. Since 2008, the total notional value of global derivatives has increased by more than $200 trillion. It is as if we survived a near-fatal fire and decided to build a new house using even more flammable material. Have you ever wondered why? Why, after coming so close to collapse, do we continue on this dangerous path? The uncomfortable answer is that we no longer know how to stop. The global financial system today is like an airplane in full flight that cannot land. Governments and central banks, those supposedly in control, are caught in an impossible dilemma. They cannot simply end the derivatives market. The attempt to dismantle this network of interconnected contracts could, by itself, trigger the very crisis they hope to avoid. It's like trying to remove an explosive from a patient without detonating it. So, instead, they do what they can. They regulate around the edges. They increase capital requirements. They monitor systemically important financial institutions more closely. It's like putting band-aids on a wound that needs surgery. Meanwhile, the most powerful banks in the world, Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Deutsche Bank, continue to dominate the market. Their balance sheets contain derivatives exposures that eclipse their entire capital base several times over. And when you ask them about it, the answer is always the same: we're hedged. Our positions offset each other. The net risk is manageable. But this is the same story we heard before the last collapse. The real danger of derivatives is not that they will fail individually. It's that in moments of extreme market stress, correlations between different asset classes, correlations that all risk models assume to be stable, can suddenly shift. When that happens, those carefully constructed hedges can fail, all at once. Would you trust your financial future to a system built on such fragile premises? Meanwhile, life goes on. Ordinary people, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, baristas, continue their daily lives, completely unaware of the sword of Damocles hanging over the global economy. They trust their pension funds, which in turn are deeply intertwined with this same derivative system. Most disturbing is how few journalists, politicians, or even academics are willing to openly discuss the scale of this problem. It's as if the magnitude of the risk is so great that most prefer to pretend it doesn't exist. When was the last time you saw in-depth reporting on derivatives on the nightly news? When was the last time a presidential candidate was questioned about their strategy for dealing with this systemic risk? While entire populations are distracted by culture wars and political dramas, the real battle for the world's economic future is being fought in the shadows, in high-frequency trading rooms and in complex computer algorithms that execute transactions in milliseconds. In 2023, when Silicon Valley Bank and Credit Suisse failed, few realized that interest rate derivatives were at the center of both collapses. The public narrative was simplified: mismanagement, bank runs, loss of confidence, all true, but incomplete. The deeper truth was that changes in interest rates had exposed structural vulnerabilities in these institutions' derivatives portfolios. It was the canary in the coal mine. Another warning, but is anyone really listening? Perhaps most frightening of all is that we are currently in an era where markets are more leveraged than ever, where global debt exceeds 300% of global GDP, where billions are moved with the click of a mouse, where algorithms, not humans, make most trading decisions. The question is not whether there will be another moment of reckoning. The question is when, and what happens when this time bomb finally explodes, when the $900 trillion in contracts begin to crumble like a house of cards, when counterparties begin to fail in their obligations in cascade. Not even the best models can accurately predict the consequences. But we know it would be different from any financial crisis we've ever seen. Deeper, more comprehensive, more fundamental. We imagine bank runs, frozen credit markets, evaporating retirement funds, entire economies paralyzed. But even this may underestimate the severity, because never before in human history have we accumulated so many financial obligations, so complexly interconnected, on such a vast scale. It's like an unprecedented economic experiment, and we are all the unwilling subjects. What would your options be in such a scenario? Would you have a plan, a refuge, a way to protect what's yours? Governments would try to intervene? Of course. Central banks would print trillions. Bailout packages would be approved. Extraordinary measures would be taken. But the scale of the problem would far exceed the authorities' capacity to solve it. It is mathematically impossible for the world's governments to bail out a $900 trillion derivatives market. There isn't enough money. There isn't enough political will. There aren't enough mechanisms. Most disturbing is that we already know this. Financial regulators, in their most sincere moments, will privately admit they don't have satisfactory answers. Economists, when pressed, will acknowledge that we are in uncharted territory. And yet, collectively, we choose to look the other way. Push the problem to tomorrow, hope that somehow it will just disappear. But problems of this magnitude don't disappear. They only grow in the shadows. They accumulate potential energy. They await the right catalyst. The great irony is that we were warned, repeatedly. Warren Buffett called derivatives financial weapons of mass destruction back in 2003. Paul Volcker, the legendary former Federal Reserve chairman, questioned their social value. Even insiders like Satyajit Das have written extensively about the dangers. But these voices have been drowned out by the constant chorus of innovation, efficiency, and financial progress. By the mantra that this time is different, by the seductive promise of wealth without risk. So, where does this leave us, as individual citizens in a system that seems to be out of control? Some opt for denial. It's too frightening to consider the implications. So, it's easier to pretend it doesn't exist. Others choose distraction, focusing on smaller, more immediate, more comprehensible crises. Many simply trust in the authorities. Surely, they wouldn't allow the system to collapse, right? But there is another approach, one based on understanding, on preparation, on resilience, because the truth is that we cannot control the global financial system. We cannot defuse the derivatives bomb. We cannot prevent the forces we have set in motion from running their course. But we can open our eyes, we can educate ourselves. We can make informed choices about how to participate, or not participate, in this system. We can diversify not just our investments, but our modes of thinking. We can build resilience networks in our communities. We can recognize that perhaps, just perhaps, true security doesn't come from complex financial promises, but from simple human relationships. What we're witnessing isn't just a financial crisis in the making. It's a defining moment in human economic history. A moment when financial abstraction has reached its logical limit. For centuries, we've moved further and further away from tangible reality, from gold to paper, from paper to digits, from digits to derivatives, from simple derivatives to structures so complex they defy human understanding. And now we're refacing the final question: how much further can we go before abstraction breaks down completely? Before the collective illusion of value, on which the entire system is based, begins to dissipate? Is it still possible to escape this labyrinth we've created? Or are we all collectively trapped in a financial architecture from which there is no longer any exit? The answer, like many of the most important questions, isn't clear. It's not black and white. It can't be reduced to headlines or tweets. What is clear, however, is that we can no longer pretend ignorance. The scale of the derivatives markets, $900 trillion, isn't just a number. It's a testament to how far we've moved away from fundamental economic reality, to how vulnerable our system has become to cascading shocks. And perhaps most importantly, it's a reminder that human systems, even the most complex, the most powerful, are fundamentally fragile, that they exist not as laws of nature, but as social constructs, dependent on shared trust and understanding. When that trust breaks down, when understanding fails, what will remain? If this has opened your eyes to the fragility of the system that controls our financial world, you must wonder what else is hidden in plain sight. Join us in the next episode, when we'll explore how global elites are already preparing for a post-collapse world, and what that means for you and your family.